The appraisal assembly line is a step-by-step process on how to get the appraisal from A to Z.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Dustin Harris.
Today's episode is sponsored by Alamode Software. Alamode is the software that I use for my form filling. I was on a coaching session this morning with someone using something else, and you know what? That something else is pretty good, but it's not Alamode. Find out more at alamode.com or 800-ALAMODE. Data Master, saving you time, saving you money. That's right, lots of money. Saving you time, about 40 minutes per report, folks. DatamasterUSA.com is where you learn more. DatamasterUSA.com. And finally, you're sponsored by Working RE Magazine, my favorite appraisal magazine, folks. And there's a few out there, but Working RE is the place I go to find out what's going on in the industry, my chosen career, if you will. Check them out. Go to WorkingRE.com. Again, it's WorkingRE.com. All right, folks, I don't know if you have this problem like I do. I forget where information is stored. So I'll have a conversation with somebody, and I know I learned something somewhere, but I can't pinpoint it. You ever have that problem? It happens to people that spend a lot of time listening and reading and educating themselves. I've got constantly 2 or 3 books going on Audible. I've got podcasts going. I have conversations frequently with people. Today's going to be kind of like that. Some of you are probably going to message me and say, Dustin, it's episode number 682. Hello. I swear I did a podcast on this topic. And I looked and I looked and I looked. Now, even if I did, I've got an update. That's actually where I wanted to start today. I wanted to say, hey, in episode number, again, 682, I have no idea what 682 is, but I'm throwing that number out. Some of you are going to say, Dustin, that's the one on candy canes. Come on. I wanted to jump on the episode today and say, listen, in episode number 682, we talked about this. I want to jump off of that, bounce off of that, and talk to you about an experience that I had recently with my daughter and what I learned even more in depth. Okay, now I'm going to share that experience with my daughter, but I'm really going to start from scratch here because I can't find that episode. I searched every keyword that I possibly could find, and it's one of these things where, again, you can't always pinpoint where you learned something. I also can't pinpoint where I talked about this. And it may have been a mastermind. It probably was. It probably was a mastermind discussion, or maybe it was a monthly meeting with the coach, which we do every single month with our all-star team. I'm guessing maybe that's where it was. So my apologies, folks, if I've said this before, but hey, even if I have, it's been long enough, you probably don't remember it anyway. So let's start from the beginning. I want to talk to you about one of the tools that I use, and it's not just maybe the most used tool, it absolutely is the most used tool in 2 aspects. Again, I've got my appraisal office, if you will. I don't call it my appraisal business anymore because we were bought out at the end of last year. So that's not true. I do have ownership in the company. So I guess I could still say that I own a part of my company, but it's more about my appraisal office. Much of the stuff that I'm doing now is very similar to what I was doing pre-acquisition. So it feels the same. I'm still kind of taking ownership, if you will, for my local branch. It's up to me to make sure that the revenue stays high, to make sure that we're bidding correctly, to make sure that we're staffed fully, to make sure that all of the tasks are getting completed, to make sure that we're turning in reports when we say that we'll turn in report. All of that stuff that I was doing prior to the acquisition, I'm doing now post-acquisition. So it's very simple for me to say my appraisal business. It feels very much the same, but I will try to correct my language and be precise. My appraisal office, if you will. This is something that I use in my appraisal office and something that I use in my coaching, and it's something that I use frequently. It is rare that you sign up for a 6-pack of private coaching, for example, where I don't assign homework to you that has to do with this particular tool. And this particular tool is homework because it is so useful to the day-to-day of an appraisal office. If you want to make good decisions, and we all do, right? If you want to make sure that you are successful in what you are doing, and we all do, right? If you want to make sure that you progress the way that you should, that you're spending less money than you're earning, that you're doing what you say you will do, that the quality of your work is high, you're going to want to use this tool. All of those things that I just mentioned can be an outgrowth. Those decisions can be an outgrowth of this particular tool. That's why I use it so much in my own appraisal office. And that's why I use it so much in my coaching, because so much of the coaching really bounces off of this. As we decide, again, if you're going to do a 6-pack with me, and that's basically 6 45-minute coaching sessions, if you're going to do something like that with me, the first session is going to be your vision story session. That's where we're going to sit down and we're going to really figure out where you're going. What I like to say is, let's make sure that the ladder is leaned up against the right wall, because I can help you all day long get to where I think you need to go. But if that's not where you want to go, or even, let's go down even further, where you need to go, well, we just wasted time. And so I want to spend the first session really creating the vision story. What does your business look like, say, in 2 years? And we get very particular. This morning I asked an individual, I said, talk to me about a Tuesday 2 years from now. Go. And he described what his Tuesday looked like when he got up, what he did first, what he did second, when he got to the office, how many hours he spent there, what he did during those hours, how long of a lunch hour, took off in the afternoon, spent time with his kids at the ball game, on and so forth, right? If I have an idea as to where you are with regard to this kind of thing, okay, and we just talked about what that looks like, then I have an idea as a coach as to where you need to go, how to get there, right? The path that you need to take. If you can tell me the destination, I can be your Google map to get you there, the turn-by-turn direction on the quickest, fastest, most efficient way to get there and to avoid the wrecks along the way. And part of that process has to do with different decisions that have to take place on a regular basis. In other words, why do we do what we do? Why is it that we're doing this? Why is it that we're doing that? Why, or should we go this direction? Should we go that direction? This tool that I'm about to share with you is that guide map. If you will use this as your basis, your foundation, the decisions that you make, not just in a coaching session, but ongoing, folks, I use this all the time. Literally, I probably pull this out at least twice a month, okay? And it's usually during my working on it, not in it time, on it, not in it, ONI time, when I spend time looking at my office, looking at my business, looking at the way things go. I pull out this roadmap, if you will, this foundation, and we say, okay, do we need to hire? Do we need to fire? Do we need to increase volume? Do we need to decrease volume? Do we need to change the types of clients? So what are the systems like? Where are our bottlenecks? Where are we getting pinch points? This stuff works, folks, and here it is. The tool that I use on a regular basis, not just in coaching, but also in my own appraisal office, I'm getting there, is the appraisal assembly line. Now, I often describe this assembly line a particular way, but I'm going to share that description after the break because I want to set this up on an experience that I had recently. But let's first establish what the assembly line is. It's very simple. It's a tool. It's a one-sheet piece of paper, if you will, that has a list, step by step. And I know what you're saying, Dustin, really, we need that? I already know. No, trust me, hear me out. This tool will help you immensely. This is a one-sheet piece of paper that has a step-by-step process from beginning to end of the appraisal process. It's probably the best way to put it, okay? The appraisal assembly line is a step-by-step process on how to get the appraisal from A to Z. Now, the assembly line does not include how to work on your business, does not include retirement goals, does not include hiring and firing goals, none of that. All the assembly line is we have a product, okay? The product that we are producing is not widgets, it's not Big Macs, it is appraisals. And in order to get the appraisal through the process, there's a step-by-step way to do that. Speaking of Big Macs, yes, I did get my start at McDonald's. Well, actually, I got my start mowing lawns. But my first real job, if you will, where I actually had to fill out tax information, a W-4, was McDonald's. And this was an interesting, and I utilized this a lot in my coaching because it was a foundational, even though I was 14 at the time, it was foundational to my understanding of how business works, and specifically how big business works. And the whole idea of McDonald's is efficiency and systems and processes. And I'm telling you folks, they have it down to the very seconds, I kid you not, on how long a Big Mac patty can be on the grill before it is seared. That's when you take a big metal thing and push down on the patty. And how many seconds after the searing before you have to flip it. And how many seconds after that until you have to drain the grease and put it on. I mean, step by step, folks. If you doubt me, trust me, there's a reason that a Big Mac tastes the same in Moscow, Idaho, and Moscow, Russia. Okay? Big Macs taste the same across the world because, well, they all have a system. And it not just goes into the cooking, but the processing and where it comes from and how it's delivered and how it's packaged and on and on and on, right? The temperature of the grill and the temperature of the freezer. And all of this stuff has a process. And I know what you're saying, Dustin, that's not me. I'm not big business. I'm not McDonald's. I don't want to do all of that. Okay, fine. That's fine. But folks, trust me, if you come to me for coaching and you want to be efficient, be prepared to do some hard things. And part of those hard things are developing a system, developing a process, developing a procedural manual, developing a step-by-step process for fill in the blank, scheduling, logging the order, quoting the order, delivering the report, pulling comps, making adjustments. All of these things in my office, I did it again. See, I'm doing good. all of these things in my office have a step-by-step process that is followed for full efficiency. Okay, where do those processes come from? Well, they start with this tool called the assembly line. Now, in my office, there are 36 steps in the assembly line. Okay, 36. Now, this fluctuates. It's not always been 36. Sometime back in the future, yeah, I watched way too much TV as a kid. Back in the past, I've had over 50 of these step-by-step processes, and I've had as few as less than 30. We've settled in on 36. That is not doctrine. That is flexible. It is a living, breathing document that we can change as we need. Okay, but currently, in its current state, there are 36 steps to get the order from quoting, okay, even before we receive the order. That's step one, is quoting the order, okay, through receiving the order, logging the order, scheduling the appointment, research on, you get the idea, okay, step-by-step process. Number two on that assembly line is the designation. The designation is this a tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 activity? Now, I know for a fact that I've done a podcast on what tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and by the way, there's a tier 4 and 5 and 6 that we don't need to worry about with the assembly line, because there's only 3 tiers when it comes to the assembly line or the process of producing an appraisal report. Okay, so what I do is I assign each of those things a tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 activity. Let me give you an example. A tier 1 activity could be pulling the zoning. Okay, going to the county website, putting in the address, verifying that that's really the address, and then pulling the zoning and saying, okay, this is C1. Okay, that's the zoning. A tier 2 level activity is somebody that is a little bit more versed in what they're looking at and can start to make some logical decisions based on that information. A tier 2 level person really needs to work in an appraisal office about a year before they get to that level. Okay, a lot of what we do is tier 1 level. It's basic data entry, basic answering the phones, blah, 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 blah. A tier 2 level activity might be, this is a C1? That could be a problem for a residential appraiser. Let me reach out to the appraiser and say, hey, just so you know, we're doing a little research on 123 Any Street, and it's in a C1 zone. Do you want us to proceed, or how do you want us to proceed? Okay, that's a tier 2 level activity to recognize what the zoning is. Okay, we're not quite into analysis yet, but we're into the next level of thinking. And of course, tier 3, you already guessed it, is appraisal type work. Okay, this would be the inspection. This would be the pulling comps. This would be driving the comps photos. This would be making adjustments, supporting those adjustments, the analytical side, the narrative describing why we didn't use the cost approach, why we used comp 1 as the main comp, as the model match. That kind of thing is tier 3 level activity. Okay, now you can break this down as much as you want or as little as you want. I try to make it basic so that I don't have 50 plus, but I also try to make it detailed enough that I don't have less than 30. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that's where you need to be. I'm simply saying that that is what works for us. And so, for example, I might have a step number 12 might be pull comps. Okay, that's all it says, pull comps, tier 3. Okay, that's pretty easy. It's pretty straightforward. Now, how do you pull comps? Well, folks, there's a whole manual underneath that particular step. The assembly line is not that. The assembly line is not the procedural manual. The assembly line is simply a step-by-step. So at a glance, you can look and say, oh, okay, that's step number 11. And step number 11 is a tier 3 level procedure, right? And then we go on to number 3. I told you there's 3 different elements involved, okay? Number 1 is the task itself. Number 2 is what tier is it, tier 1, 2, or 3. And number 3 is how much time on average does it take on a normal appraisal. Now, I know that changes from time to time. Maybe it takes you an hour and a half to pull comps on one and might take you 15, 20 minutes to pull comps on another type of report. The idea is to get it down to an average. Okay, it takes us 28 minutes on average to pull comps. Now, I'm just throwing numbers out, but that's kind of the point. Number 1, what is it? Number 2, what tier level is it? And number 3, how much time does it take to do that particular activity? Folks, with those 3 things in mind, you can make decisions like you never did before. Let me share with you one other that I usually add to mine, okay? And I usually handwrite this in because it does change. And that is who is assigned to this thing, okay? And it may be more than one person, right? You might put pull comps, Scott, Tyler, Dustin, okay? That's the person that does that because that's the person that's trained and is best at doing that thing. Scheduling, Kate, Johanna, right? Those are the 2 people that typically schedule. Doesn't mean somebody else can't do it. Doesn't mean you don't have people cross-trained, but it means in general, these are the people that do step number 11, step number 13, and step number 16, okay? Now, with that being said, I hope you have a pretty good picture in mind as to what the assembly line looks like. Again, it's one page. It's number 1, number 2, number 3, just each line, okay, with the thing, the tier level, and how much time it takes, okay? With that in mind, I hope you can start to understand why this would be a useful tool. Right? If you know, for example, how much time this all takes, down at the bottom, you can sum it all up. If this is in an Excel spreadsheet, you can simply hit the function that adds all of those minutes together and says, it takes you 456 minutes on average to complete an appraisal start to finish. Again, throwing out numbers. They're not necessarily my numbers. Now, With that information, you can now say, okay, are we being as effective as we need to be? Do we need to hire somebody else? Do we need to fire somebody? If I look at steps number 6, 12, and 13 that happen to be assigned to Jack, is it very obvious that Jack's not doing his job because it takes an average of 13 minutes to do those 3 tasks. However, when you look at Jack, it takes him an average of 25 minutes, right? Well, he's new, he's training, he'll get there. Okay, fine. That's a business decision that I need to make, but I couldn't make it unless I have this tool in front of me that I know what I'm judging it against, right? In other words, you'd want to have a rubric, and that's what this is. It's a measuring stick, right? You couldn't go out and measure a house and say, well, how long is that wall? And you say 14. 14 what? 14. I measured it. It said 14. I took the laser and I measured it and said 14. 14 centimeters? 14 meters? Well, 14 feet, dummy. Well, okay, we'll say that then. I don't know what the rubric is. I don't know what the measuring stick is for you to utilize that. And that's what this is. It's a measuring stick, if you will, to know what the step-by-step process is in the appraisal world, right? But it's also to be measured against what the average is versus what your people might be doing, which, again, helps you to know your numbers and helps you to make decisions that will be best for you and your business moving forward. Okay, now I know what some of you are thinking. Well, Dustin, how do you know that it takes an average of 28 minutes to do comps? I did one the other day that took me 3 hours to choose comps. Okay, hang on to that thought because I'm going to tell you a story that happened to me recently when we get back from the break that I think you're going to like because it helps to kind of put this all together and makes it realistic for what you're going to do on a day-to-day basis. Hang on for that. First, I want to pause here and remind you about Working RE Magazine. Working RE sends me an email a couple times a week, folks, and I love when I get an email from Working RE because here's what I do every time. I look at the subject line. If it's something I'm interested in, I either click on it now if I've got time, or I save it for later when I know I'm going to have time. By the way, the snooze feature on email is absolutely awesome. Okay, I'll use it all the time. Hey, I'm going to snooze that till tonight because I know I'm going to have more time this evening to read that than I have right now when I need to return a bunch of phone calls. If it's something I'm not interested in, I hit delete and I move on. So for those of you who are worried about, I don't want to get spammed, folks, first of all, it's a couple of emails a week, if that, okay? Second of all, it only takes a second to look at the subject line. I promise you, at least a couple of times a month, and probably more than that, you're going to want to read what's on Working RE Magazine, and it's free. Costs you nothing. WorkingRE.com is where you find out more. Again, WorkingRE.com, and sign up for their free newsletter. Data Master is saving appraisers time. And folks, you've heard me say it 1,000 times, and I know it gets to be a mantra, but listen. Saving appraisers time, saving appraisers, fill in the blank, money, right? Time is money, folks, when you are working for yourself. When you're trading time for money, time is money. Imagine saving, we talked about the assembly line today. What if you could cut out 40 minutes of that assembly line every single report that you do? What is your average turn time from top to, I'm not talking about days, I'm talking about hours, man hours. How many man hours does it take you on average to go from 0 to 60 on your appraisal, okay? Go from A to Z to delivery. I can tell you in my office, it's somewhere between 4 and 5 hours. It fluctuates. Now, some will take 10 plus hours and some will take 3 hours, okay? But on average, it's about 4 to 5 hours, okay? If you times that by the number of appraisals that you're doing per month, okay, do that math. And now I want you to reduce that, okay, by, let's just be conservative, 30 minutes. Let's say something can save you 30 minutes per report. So for every 2 reports you do, you've saved an hour's worth of time. Use that for your math. Tell me it's not worth it. Okay, if you do 30 reports a month, you've now saved, okay, 15 hours a month. What could you do with 15 hours, folks? And I know what you're wondering. Oh, but what about the quality? What if I hit a button and it's not? Folks, it's right. It's going to be better than you hand typing it in and screwing it up. Trust me. Datamaster USA is where you find out more. DatamasterUSA.com. And finally, we're sponsored by Alamode Software. Speaking of saving time, folks, there are so many tools, smart tools, in the Alamode software that it would be impossible for me to share all of them with you. I will share one of my favorites. It's called the Smart Adjust. When you go to your comps, you can lay them out across your screen, and I've got screens that will allow me to put 10 comps on one page. I can see them all at once. I can see every adjustment I need to make, and I can just put adjustments in there that I know are correct. If I do my little calculation, I find out that I want to use, say, $65 a square foot in GLA. I can put that on the top. I can say don't adjust if it's more or less than 100 square feet, okay? Unless it's more than 100 square feet, I should say. And all of a sudden, the Smart Adjust, the computer says, okay, I'll make that adjustment across the board, and comp 1 doesn't need an adjustment, comp 2 needs this adjustment, comp 3, and folks, it just happens automatically. Think of the time savings on that alone, and that's just one tool. Alamode.com is where you find out more, or pick up the phone, call them, 800-ALAMODE. All right, welcome back to the program. Dustin Harris hanging out, talking about the number one tool that I use in my office, which is the assembly line. Now, some of you are saying, well, Dustin, what about the anomalies? Not all appraisals are created equal. And you are correct in that. Well, Dustin, I'm not going to schedule an appointment for a drive-by. That would be silly. I just need to put it on the calendar. I don't need to call anybody. Okay, fine. Yeah, that's an anomaly, right? That's not your norm. That's outside the norm, but it still fits within the assembly line. Well, Dustin, what if I'm doing a review? I'm not going to necessarily pull comps in a review. I'm going to look at the comps, and I might do a little research, but I'm not going to necessarily pull comps, or I'm not going to make adjustments, for example, unless I disagree with the value and have to go a little bit further. Folks, I get it. The nice thing about the assembly line is it is flexible. Let me give you a true life example, and this is where I wanted to start today. I decided to start with the first half because I can't find the other episode. I'm pretty sure I must have done it on a monthly meeting with a coach, which we do, of course, every single month. It's an interactive meeting. It takes about 2 hours. The first hour is something like this. Let's talk about the assembly line and how to use it. And then the second hour is what's called micro-mentoring. Micro-mentoring is when you come with your problems or your coaching questions and you say, hey, Dustin, help me. I'm doing this and I need your help. I'm hiring a VA and I have absolutely no idea what to ask, okay? Talk me through that. And we can do that as a group, and it's super, super efficient and super, super cool. All right. Recently, I had an experience with my daughter that I wanted to share with you because it was kind of eye-opening to me how some of the things that I've been teaching over the years about the assembly line, I kind of share this analogy. And folks, I've never actually been in the analogy except vicariously through a movie. Okay. So for example, Ford versus Ferrari, right? Have you seen the show? There's a scene where the CEO, the president of Ford, is standing up on the catwalk. It's the best way I can describe it, looking down into the assembly line down below. And I don't know if he blows a whistle or yells or what have you, but he has everything stop. And he makes an announcement, okay, from up there on top. Now, the thing is he can be up on top looking down on the assembly line and have a vantage point to kind of see what's going on. Well, recently I visited my daughter in Michigan. You know where this is going, right? She is in East Lansing, and she's doing her schooling, her postgraduate schooling there. And I happened to be in Chicago for a mastermind, and I thought, you know what, let's take a couple days and visit. So I flew into Detroit. And we spent a couple days in Detroit, and then a couple days in East Lansing, and then a day in Chicago. It was a great time to catch up with my 24-year-old daughter, just see how life's going and meet her friends and see her apartment. And it was just a cool experience all around. But one of the greatest experiences while I was there happened in Detroit. I had never really been to Detroit. I'd flown in and out of Detroit airport, but I'd never actually been outside the airport doors. And so we decided to spend a little bit of time in Detroit and just kind of see what it's all about. And now I have a reference for Detroit, right? I've been there. I kind of can feel it out and kind of, know what it's like to live there. I was there for a couple days. But you know what I'm saying? Now, get a feel for a place by spending some time in a place. Well, one of the things that I wanted to do, and let's just be honest, there's not a ton of things to do in Detroit, especially in the winter when I flew in there. But one of the things I really wanted to do was to visit the Ford Museum and the Ford assembly line. Okay, so we went to the Ford Museum, and it was absolutely fabulous. I highly recommend anybody that goes to Detroit. That's got to be number one on your list. And by the way, take some time. We spent about 3 hours there. I could have easily spent another 3 hours there. Lots to see. Part of that was the extra ticket that we bought to the assembly line, where they take you in a bus and you actually go to the Ford factory and they take you for a tour of the Ford factory. Part of that tour, as you can imagine, what's the episode about here, is to see the assembly line from the catwalk. You stand up above and you look down, and they are actually producing the Ford F-150 as you're standing up there, right? Now, the assembly line was shut down the day that I was there, unfortunately. So I couldn't see it in production, but I could see what was going on. When they shut down the assembly line, they simply turn off the switch, and all of the trucks in their various states of build are still down there below you. So you've got this line, as you can imagine, that snakes up and down the aisles. Okay, think of a huge Costco, if you will, with long lines, and all the way up and down are these trucks that are moving through this assembly line. Okay, just snaking up and down, up and down, up and down, like one of those rope things that you stand in line to get your food, or at the airport that you have to go up and down and back and forth. This is what the assembly line looks like from the top, and you can kind of see in the beginning what it looks like as they come in the door versus what they look like at the end when they're all fully assembled. Now, here's the most interesting part of all of this. Yes, it was interesting to see, oh yeah, I see, step by step. I see, Henry Ford was brilliant, to create the assembly line. He was the father of the assembly line, right? And here I am looking at, many years later, over 100 years later, and looking at what he did and thinking, oh my gosh, this is amazing, right? This is really amazing to see how this works. But the most interesting part of all of this will come back to our question that we had just after the break. And what about the anomalies? Here's the key, folks. I was absolutely flabbergasted to learn that the Ford F-150 is all assembled at the same time that any other Ford 150 that it's on production is assembled. What I mean by that is they don't just send all the limited white trucks with moonroofs addition through the assembly line, and then they start the red ones, and they start the blue ones, and then they do, folks, not only that, but every trim possible on the F-150 is sent through at the same time. You might have a very basic F-150 with the very basic trim package right next to a Ford Raptor, which is the highest trim package, right? With different color schemes and different upgrades and the moonroof and this, that, and the other, right? And the only difference as they snake up and down this assembly line is there's a sheet of paper, literally a sheet of paper. It's not digital. It's a piece of paper that is taped to the side of the truck that basically has all of the specs that are on there. This one needs to be painted white. This one needs to have a moonroof. This one needs to have steps on the back bumper. As they go through this process, they still have the same chassis, right? They still have, in most cases, the same engine. They go through an up and down and up and down, and they get extras added to that process as they go through. Actually, I'm going to correct myself. They don't always have the same engine. There are different engines in there as well, and that, of course, is the same process that I'm describing. Like, they don't have to have the same engine. They don't have to have the same color. They don't have to have the same anomaly. The assembly line is the same, okay? Every single F-150 that goes through the Dearborn plant goes through the same assembly line, the same aisles, the same snaking up and down. But when you are done, it is a different product depending on the anomalies. Are you starting to catch the analogy here? Don't get hung up on the assembly line and saying, well, yeah, but that doesn't really apply to drive-bys. That doesn't really apply to reviews. That doesn't really apply to fill in the blank. Folks, it all applies. Now, you might have to tweak something. Step number 6 might look different for a drive-by than step number 6 looks for a 1004 UAD. Okay? And a 1004 UAD might look different than a 1004 UAD FHA. Right? Maybe step number 8 is a little bit different because it's an FHA. That's okay. The assembly line is still the assembly line. It still works. Henry Ford was brilliant, okay? And this idea is now ours to capture. Do you have your office set up in such a way that you can be as efficient as possible? If not, I can help you with that. Please reach out to me. Would love to do some personal coaching with you or see you join one of our masterminds. You can go to my website for more information. The address is www.theappraisercoach.com.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.